But he's married to his wife Lilith, and he has a very subdued or sublimated libido, and he was part of what was known as the EOD. And that is where he was known as Frater Set O. And the EOD is the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Now, I'm not talking about the amateur press group, okay? So everybody who looks that up and sees a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft fans or something like that, okay, forget all that shit. I'm talking about EOD, the actual occult order of the esoteric order of the Sumerian god Dagon, the fish god that taught humanity how to farm and how to raise a civilization, half man, half fish, of enormous proportions, a kind of masculine mermaid the size of Godzilla. That is how he is basically related to us via image and via legend of the Sumer culture. Now, this was what he was a member of. Dino has that same kind of, shall we say, suffix to his name. Whenever that's appended to anyone, run like hell. They're a member of an esoteric order, most likely of the left-hand path. So we are emphasizing that, and somebody else asked me via email about the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia. Okay, the House of Solomon is the ruling imperial house in exile of the Ethiopian Empire. And it basically boasts or brags patrilineal descent from Solomon of Israel himself and the Queen of Sheba, the latter of whom, it is known, gave birth to Menelik I, after her biblically described visit to Solomon in Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem. This is the reason why the dynasty is a bastion of Judaic and Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. And it has ruled Ethiopia from the 10th century before Christ. Yes, you've heard me, from the 10th century before Christ. They are not so much a Christian dynasty as they are a Davidic dynasty. So the Merovingian bloodline analogy I was providing only for popular access. In other words, so that people could grasp the enormity of what I was talking about with the Ethiopian kings. But the Merovingian bloodline goes back, of course, to the Son of God, to Christ, if it is not hypothetical, if it is genetically viable. And, of course, there's much evidence that it is, and that constitutes the ruling elites of the royal houses, the noble houses, the dynasties of Europe. But the Menelik dynasty goes back to the House of David, goes back to Solomon, goes back to 10 centuries. We're talking about 1,000 years before the Son of God walked the earth. So it's as old as Egypt, as old as China, one of the oldest civilizations on earth. Sadly, they were overthrown by the communists. The throne was abdicated. But no doubt in the near future, we can only hope and pray and support its reestablishment. Oh, I am sorry. Laura Lee Solomon has spanked me. I was pressing some buttons while I was on air. And I've got this headphone that records everything that I am saying. I really got to be careful of what I do while I've got this headphone on. It's just far too sensitive. But since we are talking about the Solomonic dynasty, that will bring us to a topic that was brought up in an ongoing, shall we say, hit and run kind of talk going on between Gary States, a favorite visitor of mine to my Facebook timeline, who works for the United States government. And not everybody who works for the United States government is an enemy. He is one of those people who I can pretty confidently say is on our side. And he was arguing with Dutch Blazer, and they both have a very different opinion on the situation in Israel, on the situation concerning Judaism. I'd like to bring up a little dimension to that, or add some dimension to that. But before I do want to kind of at least round out acceptably what I was saying about Peter Levinda, because a number of people have brought it up, and I could do an entire Topical Tuesday on him alone. We'll probably do so at some point in the future. When I was saying he was damaging children's lives through the book he wrote, the Necronomicon, which he wrote under the pseudonym of Simon, what we are talking about is children experimenting with Cthulhuid or Chthonian phonic underworld magic as was made popularly available and accessible in ritual format by Peter Levenda. And one of the people who did that was somebody who was transitionally a visitor and a friend of mine on my Facebook timeline, Matthew Schwab. And he was quite open, so I'm not giving away any secrets or defaming anyone at all. He was quite open and posted frequently about his on my timeline about his experiments with Cthulhuoid cultic ritual. And then he wondered why his life was so distorted, why he never got laid. He frankly admitted quite openly to being a virgin. He frankly admittedly opened that he'd never held a job regularly. He would get fired within 48 hours. I mean, this sort of thing happens when you mess with these forces without proper initiation, without training, or you're playing with them. You can't play with nuclear energy. You can't play with chemical weapons. You can't play with vials of biological diseases, which your government is obviously doing with, in terms of the Hunta virus, Marburg, and all these various hemorrhagic fevers that are plaguing us, literally plaguing us at this moment. You just can't do that and not expect repercussions. So when you have a situation like I described with Clyde Lewis, which I went into depth of before, I compared him to Lou Gentili. Lou Gentili was an individual that I described in terms that make people think that he was a tragic figure. As I said, just to cover it for the listenership who's not too familiar with him, he would go into places that were known to be haunted or diabolically infested. We're not talking about places reputed or rumored to be haunted or diabolically infested. We're talking about places that were known to be cesspits of diabolic activity. And he would go into these areas and literally take the name of the Lord in vain. He was of Catholic background, claimed that he was the only layman given permission by the Holy See or the Vatican to perform exorcisms. And he was probably, I would think, lying. And he would go into these environments and in terms of Latin, shout forth the name of the Lord, Jesus et Almanum Salvator, etc., and all the rest of this, and just stir up remarkably violent reactions and results from various infernal forces that ultimately led to his daughter, her face being ripped off by a wild dog, his falling through a floor and shattering his spine, ultimately succumbing very shortly after that to a very violent, aggressive form of cancer. I could go on and on. Well, Clyde Lewis, of course, his own Ground Zero Radio, performs seances on air, basically gets the Ouija board out, messes with the Ouija board, performs satanic rituals. We're talking about an individual who now is, of course, is quite ill and has had to turn himself into the hospital with angina or heart pains multiple times after having to turn himself in for good God, what was it? I think it was some kind of blood clot. He needed a blood thinner, and was it an embolism? I believe it was an embolism was the medical term for it. I'll have Laura Lee correct me on that if I'm wrong, but he definitely is not doing well. Well, we're talking about an individual. What do you expect when you play with forces like this? And do you think you could act with impunity if you take a loaded firearm and give it to a child and have them use that as their version of a toy? Of course not. This is insanity. And if people don't respect the occult, if this is just a toy, then believe me, you are a toy in return to these forces. You play with them, they're going to have no problem playing with you. And thank you, Laura Lee. Yes, a thromboembolism. So basically, we have a situation in which all of that is occurring with these people, and this is what was going on with Matthew Schwab. Again, not defaming or slandering this individual. This is something that he openly admitted he was doing. He would openly describe the miserable aspects of his life, and yet never seemed to consider the source as being what he was playing with. Now, this happened to so many children who have taken on a popular Necronomicon, which has sold forever. We're talking about it coming out in the 1970s, around the same time as Star Wars and Jaws. And since that period of time, It, along with the Satanic Bible of Anton Szandor LaVey, have been around forever in the steady sales department. They never go out of fashion. They are always selling. And kids take these grimoires. The Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible is really not a grimoire. It